In this week's episode, I'm joined by Lekeshia Hicks, she, her, diversity strategist and inclusive leadership coach. This week, our conversation is about breaking barriers with Fenix FC, cutting out racism in barbering, and inclusive beauty that benefits everyone. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. Welcome to the show. Lekeshia, will you tell folks a little bit about yourself, please?
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. We definitely need these positive vibes in DEI. As you said, I'm Lekeshia Hicks, and I have a little boutique DEI consulting firm where I help leaders add inclusion into their leadership using sponsorship and allyship.
Awesome. Can you tell, I know you have a book that just came out. Can you tell folks a little bit about your book?
I do. So I just published a book. You can purchase that at Barnes & Noble, titled Wins and Woes for People of Color in Spaces, it's called Receipts and Revelations is the big title, and Wins and Woes, where you can write down the great things that are happening in your career, as well as if you run into some bumps in the road, there's directions there on how to file a complaint and having that documentation being the number one thing we need for promotions, as well as if we are going to file a complaint or a grievance. So it's your one-stop career shop that you can have right there on your desk in order to keep those things close to you.
And so it's a workbook, so folks can use it in a very practical way. And I love that because I think so many books are not quite as practical as they could be.
Yes. Giving you, it's kind of like your career diary. Yep. Every day writing down, what you have so you can go back and look at those statistical things, quantifiable, when we talk about getting promotions or asking for things when it comes time to your one-on-one, you have it all right there. Because we all know we have a lot of information in our heads and you forget all the great things that you've done. You forgot those compliments that you got from your teammates. And if you write them down, take some time every week to brain dump all the things that happened, or as they happen, then you'll have them right there ready for you to outbrief.
I think that is such a great resource for folks. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes for folks. You can check it out on Barnes & Noble. So, Lekeshia, there's a lot going on right now in the world. There's a lot of tension. I think that there's just so much tension right now. How are you holding up?
It's a one day at a time type of thing, which is the way I take every day at life, right? Yeah. And always looking for the positive side of things. It helps to stay grounded when we're going through these things. Every 4 years, of course, we have these election cycles, so we kind of know what we're going to do and how it's going to go. Whether who wins or who loses is not really important. It's important, of course, but not important to how you approach this time frame, right? Having those coping skills or whatever you need to keep yourself protected is important.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. In this week's 5 Things newsletter, I wrote about how hard it has been in the past for me to ask for help.
Nice.
And I'm wondering about what your perspective is on this. So I shared a story about a couple of years ago in which it was basically right around this time. I really felt like a big failure when I had to lay off an employee. I felt very sad for her. I felt a lot of shame for me. Certainly my ego took a hit, and all I really wanted to do was hide. And I've definitely felt that way periodically since. But what I decided to do in that moment was challenge myself because I knew that hiding wasn't going to help anything. So I decided to open up, and I texted a few folks who I'd known through work events but hadn't really gotten super close to yet. I was starting to bond a little bit. And I knew that in messaging them, I could be perceived as weak. And I was trying to avoid that, but also at the same time, Brene Brown says that vulnerability is strength. So I decided, all right, here we go. So I decided to share vulnerably. And I asked about openings for my former employee. And it actually ended up working out nicely in that everyone showed empathy, everyone responded, and it deepened those relationships. And I was reminded of all this because I was talking to a friend last week who was struggling with something similar about asking for help and the fear around that and the fear about weakness. And, these things are really hard. And so wondering what your perspective is on this, on asking for help and vulnerability as weakness or strength.
Yeah. So I think it's a learned skill, right? Because the
Yeah.
messaging that we get growing up is that it is a weakness to ask for help. But one of my words for 2024 was visibility. And
Mm,
in order for me to be visible, I needed a lot of assistance. So
yeah.
asking for help and being collaborative has it's changed my business and my life like tenfold, right? Getting out there, and there's someone always going through the same thing that you're going through, even though you think you're the only one. So
Yeah.
having these conversations out loud and being collaborative is the way I believe we advance in any and everything, like sharing stories, storytelling, and really building community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm Gen X. I certainly wasn't raised to talk about my feelings. My parents would have been appalled to hear me see me writing about this stuff because
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic as well. So there's like a lot of shame around these types of things, and it's kind of tough baggage to get over sometimes. But you're right; it's a skill. Like learning these things is a practice skill.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think what's a way that you think we can sort of bring this more into leadership development work?
I think having the conversations, everything starts with open conversations and creating that psychologically safe environment for people to
Hmm.
want to open up to these conversations, and not feel like it's going to be used against them. I see a lot of groups that they create for leadership development or ERGs, and they still feel, even in those groups, that they can't really be vulnerable because they're afraid of how it would be used outside of the group.
Yeah.
So, really, really focusing on how to create that psychologically safe space to give it all up. And then I attend these meetings locally that are, we call, it's called Business Over Breakfast. And he calls it the locker room. So it's business owners, we're in the locker room. And this is where you kind of air out all the things that are going wrong in your business that you're ashamed of. You couldn't make payroll, or, you couldn't, like you said, you had to let go of somebody. And having them come up, other people are asking, what can I help you with? I can provide this, I can provide that. And I think that type of collaboration really creates that space where you're like, oh, I can really let go of this and tell somebody, and I'll get solutions to
Yeah.
help me get through it.
Yeah, that's great because it's not just about empathy, a little solution. I'm a very solutions oriented person. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very easy to give solutions for other people than it is for
Hmm.
yourself. So
Hmm.
I can help any and everybody fix everything, but when it comes to doing those same things for myself, sometimes I get stuck and frozen. So being in that space where I can be like, I have this problem. How are y'all handling it? And getting
Yeah.
those different perspectives has been really helpful.
I love that. And I think that's a great lesson for folks to really make sure that they have a community or network of folks, even if it's just a small group that you can bounce ideas off of, get support, whether or not they can be outside of work, right? And just to have that extra perspective really makes a big difference. Okay, and of course, it can lead to deeper relationships. All right. Well, let's get into this week's good vibes. The first story this week comes from JCPenney, which is breaking new ground with a clothing line tailored for people who use wheelchairs. So this is specifically for people who are wearing women's clothing. So this is a collection that offers accessible, stylish options, including easy access zippers, adjusted pocket placement, and shorter sleeves. And I love this. I mean, adaptive fashion is definitely having a moment,
Mhm.
but I haven't seen it in JCPenney's yet. Not that I go there.
And I'm looking because this is actually one of the things. I usually start my year and my planning with things that I kind of want to focus on for the year. And sustainable fashion has been one of those things. Like I want to get rid of all the fast fashion and really create a capsule wardrobe, and also thinking about adaptable clothing and brands that provide this. So I really love this. And usually when we have these type of innovative breakthroughs, it not only helps the community that it was targeted at, but the whole world, right? There's people
Yeah.
who may not be in a wheelchair who might need some adaptable clothing for some other reason. So I really love when we have these innovative ideas that come out to the mainstream.
Yeah, I do. You're right. They ultimately benefit everyone. That's great. Okay, the second story this week comes from Fenix FC, Europe's first all transgender men's soccer team, which is officially in Spain's regional league. The people on this team are all trans men. And I mean, how amazing is this? They had to overcome discrimination, league entry hurdles, and exclusion. But this is amazing.
Right. I love this as well. Of course, I love everything, but I love this too because there are conversations being had about where participation should be happening. Can it happen on the men's side or the women's side, and the fairness and the science and the biology behind it? So creating this until a clear ruling, I guess, is made on all of that is amazing. And I think that it still gives them that way to participate and have that sense of belonging. And it's just, again, one of those overall wins for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Well, here's another overall win for everyone. The third story this week comes from the city of St. Louis, which, thanks to Alderwoman Shamim Clark Hubbard, repealed a restrictive law from the 1940s that stopped barbershops from staying open past 6:30 p.m. So the original intention of this law was to limit competition from black barbers as a tool of racial discrimination and exclusion. And now that time frame, the time limit is gone. I mean, 6:30, like that's so strange to begin with, but
It's very, and I wonder how enforcement was going. Like, was it really being enforced, and are people getting fined or tickets, or is it one of those laws that was on the books and just kind of hanging out as something that was old? But I like that we're reviewing laws and seeing where they're not serving people any longer, and repealing those type of laws that create barriers for people.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's good for everyone, giving all barbers the freedom to choose their hours. I mean, such a silly thing that was even excluded in the first place. But I think that it's just so important to look at these local policies for lots of racism of the past, and which is perpetuating.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Tennessee had something similar with braiders, where it was trying to restrict people from being able to braid and needing a cosmetology license, and we had to review those laws and kind of change some things so that home braiders were able to continue to make money without having to get these very expensive licenses. So there's always something and some work
Wow.
to be done in the way we do business and laws.
Wow. So is it all cool now in Tennessee?
I think it's getting there. Not all cool, but it definitely is getting there because the visibility has been put on this restriction and these laws, and changing it so that you don't have to get a full cosmetology license to be able to braid. There's now a braider's license.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's one way to do it. That's great. Whew. Jeez. Thank goodness for good vibes. All right. So the fourth story this week is from beauty brands who are finally recognizing that inclusive design benefits everyone, not just customers with disabilities. So this is the theme for this week. All of this
Ah,
stuff benefits everyone. So Elf Beauty has new accessible packaging like QR codes providing audio product descriptions, and this is to support independent use for people with vision loss. Rare Beauty, Guide Beauty, and Target all have integrated easier to grip finishes and universal design standards that enhance usability for all. These are the types of things that I take for granted.
Yeah, I actually love this because I love makeup and playing in makeup. I'm not a expert or anything, but sometimes getting into some of those packages is like, is this childproof? I can't even open it, and I don't have any restrictions. So I love that they're creating this space. We all know the beauty space is one of those spaces that is still coming up and creating shades ranges that are more inclusive and doing all of these things. So I love that they are also looking at accessibility, because we know that accessibility is usually the last thing people try to tackle when they come up with business and brands and things. So I love that they're doing all the things and trying to include everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that it benefits everyone. It's probably not a big change in terms of design. And then, of course, it's something that can be sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last story this week is about the Athena Pledge. So AT&T, Capital One, Cisco, Deloitte have united under the Athena Pledge to encourage other brands to invest in women's sports. So they expect women's sports revenue to hit $1.28 billion this year. And by committing to the Athena Pledge, what they're doing is providing a roadmap for other brands to also invest in women's sports. So they're providing data, strategy, networking opportunities for brands to get involved, ultimately benefiting elite athletes. There's been a lot of reluctance for companies to sort of, commit because of the lack of data of the ROI. So this is
Right.
helping with that.
Love that. And as a parent of a woman athlete, well, she's a little girl, she's only 13, you can see the difference in what they invest in on the boys team and the girls team. So I'm wanting her to be able to grow up thinking that she can make it to the WNBA and have investments in her that help her to get there, and that she can make these millions like the men's teams and the NBA. They're bringing out numbers. It's increasing. People are getting more interested in women's basketball specifically because of everything that's been going on. Women's basketball is just as exciting as the NBA. So yes, let's continue to invest in women's sports and get us on the map as well, making these big money.
Yeah, and the U.S. women's soccer team, national soccer team, has been a really big trailblazer here as well. And what I was really excited by was after the Liberty won the WNBA championships, did you see that the teams opted out, or the players opted out of the collective bargaining agreement, and they're renegotiating their contract, their union terms, essentially,
Yeah.
because they know they deserve more.
They do. And women's soccer, if I'm not mistaken, was bringing in more than men's soccer. So it couldn't be a revenue issue because they're clearly bringing in more. So, yeah, I'm glad that all of this is being looked at, and they're taking that approach to increase the funds and just investment in women, period.
Yeah, I think that the starting pay for a WNBA player was like 70,000 or something,
Right.
but it's very hard to live on that.
Right. Which is why they play in overseas ball and have to have, big endorsements and other jobs in order to kind of live their life. So,
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see that the Athena Pledge can hopefully bridge some of that gap and get more investment. All right. This is awesome. Lekeshia, it has been a real treat having you on the show. We have a feature called Good Vibes to Go. I'm going to share one of my good vibes to go, and then I'll ask you to share one of your good vibes to go. So one of my good vibes to go is to check out a DEI book called Inclusion Nudges. It has 100 crowdsourced DEI behavioral design ideas that specifically nudge our brains towards inclusion using principles of neuroscience. I love this book. I've used it a lot in my work. Highly recommend it. So folks, check that out. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes. And Lekeshia, what is your good vibe to go?
my good vibe to go is going to be around this theme of collaboration. We just spoke about how important collaboration is. And my good vibe for 2025 is having written down a plan to increase my business visibility and wanting to partner with a minority business that is invested in tech. And out of nowhere, not really nowhere, Bernadette, here you appear. So I'm happy that came to fruition. And my collaboration for 2025 is with the Equality Institute so that we can power together to bring more diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility training and assessments to as many organizations who are willing to accept us.
Yes, exactly. Love that. Cheers to collaboration. Folks, find collaborators, find your support system, find your peers who can lift you up when things are rough. I'll be honest, I had a pretty devastating morning professionally. And I got on this show 10 minutes early to talk to Lekeshia, get ready, and you cheered me up. So thank you. Thank you, friend. Thank you, friend. This stuff really matters. It really matters having a support system. The collaboration is key. So folks, don't be afraid to ask for help, regardless of how you're raised. Vulnerability is strength. Folks, Lekeshia, how can folks get in touch with you?
Right here on LinkedIn, Lekeshia Angelique, and all social platforms, Lekeshia Angelique. So I look forward to collaborating with you all.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll make sure you all of that is put in the show notes. And folks, if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thanks a lot. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.